Hello, welcome back to Algebra. Here we're learning how to graph inequalities that involve two variables. This is lesson number 2. These problems are going to be exactly the same as what we've done in the last lesson. They're just slightly more involved, but ultimately the process is exactly the same for these problems as what we've learned in the past. No big surprises. So let's just get some extra practice. What if we had the inequality 2 times x minus y less than or equal to 2? All right, so this one's a little bit more complicated than the last ones just because we have lots of terms on the left and then we have the term on the right. But ultimately, you want to basically pretend that it's a line, essentially is what you're going to do for all of these problems. So we're going to take all the x terms on the other side. We're going to isolate y by itself. So what we're going to do first is get rid of the 2x. By subtracting 2x from the left, it will then disappear and go to 0. So we'll just have negative y on the left. When we move the 2x on the right-hand side, it'll become negative 2x because we're subtracting it. And then we'll have the plus 2 from right here. All right. Now this is all pretty close to exactly what we want. However, we don't want the negative sign here. So we need to divide by negative 1. So what we're going to do is divide the left by negative 1, and we'll divide the right by negative 1. And when we divide an inequality or multiply by a negative number, we need to flip the sign of the inequality here. So the next step will be dividing by negative 1. So we'll have a positive y. And then this sign will flip around the other direction. And then we'll take and divide the right-hand side by negative 1. So you'll end up with 2x minus 2. You see, we just divide this by negative 1, divide this by negative 1, divide by this by negative 1. And in the process, we flip this around. So essentially, if you kind of cover up the inequality and pretend that this is a line, then you can graph this just like we've graphed any line that we've graphed in the past. So you all know that because of the way mx plus b form, that the y-intercept b, which is this guy, is negative 2. And the slope here is also 2, or positive 2, which as a fraction is written as 2 over 1. So now we have everything we need to go over on the right-hand side and graph this guy. We're going to go to a y-intercept of negative 2. So we'll come down here, negative 1, negative 2, and we'll put a dot right here. And then we'll come back up here and say the slope is 2 over 1, rise over run. So up 2 over 1. So from here, up 2 over 1 unit. And that's enough to go ahead and draw a line. But when we draw our line, we have to go and look and say, what kind of line are we going to draw? It's going to be a solid line because we have a greater than or equal to. So if this did not have the equal to under it, we would use a dashed line. But here we're going to use a solid line. We've discussed all the reasons why we're doing that in the last lesson. There. So we just kind of line it up as best we can, and we'll go ahead and draw that line through these 2 points like this. And ultimately, we're going to have a double-headed arrow right here, and then we have to go for our last step and figure out how do we shade this guy. In other words, is it going to be